Hello, everybody. In this presentation, I want to try to bring into this California policy discussion two separate groups of people who we don't hear so much from. One is the national discussion of academic researchers about special education response to intervention and achievement gaps. And the other is the view from the classroom, where teachers are going about their business and being asked to do more and more. So to begin with, a lot of this discussion tends to have a negative tone to it because we're attacking such difficult problems. So understand that all the people I'm talking about and their opinions, we all want the most and the best for these children. So if you look at the state as a whole, 15 years ago, we were at the very bottom of the nation in reading and math achievement. And by 2019, we'd come up to 38th in the nation. So we are still below the national average. And I think that when you look at the performance of all our students, we should keep this in the back of our minds. It's not that we're doing great and we just want to do a little better. It's that we really need to do better. Certainly, these gaps in performance in reading and math exist at kindergarten entry. So the governor's plan to increase early education spending is well targeted, but by itself, that is not going to fully erase the achievement gaps. It's good to be reading ready and math ready in the fall of kindergarten, but the real details of these skills are learned in grades 1 through 3 and the basis for everything that comes later. And a lot of what I'll be talking about is predicated on the understanding that our students in grades 1 through 3 are not doing that well on a national standard. Now, let's talk about disabilities. The old definition of disability was a discrepancy between aptitude and achievement. And this has been rejected for many reasons. Basically, the aptitude and achievement scores are highly correlated. And so there aren't many people in this gap, and it's not a well-validated gap. And of course, if you really follow that definition, then you'll deny services to all the kids with, quote, low ability, because if they have low ability and low achievement, then they don't have a discrepancy. So beginning around 2000, there have been strong movements to change the definition of this. And some people have gone to this processing strengths and weaknesses definition, but it really isn't that good. This is the national discussion of it. It gives little clear guidance about which interventions to use to help the student with reading or math. All of this is a summary of my policy brief, and there are citations to the research literature supporting the things I'm saying. So the thing that has really taken over beginning around 2004, when it was written into the reauthorization of IDEA, is the idea of response to intervention. And this builds on what Kevin was just saying. 3 tiers of instruction, increasingly individualized. Tier 1 is for regular instruction, regularly performing students. Tier 2 is for those who are below grade level, but not very, very far below grade level. And Tier 3 is particularly individualized instruction for students who are likely disabled. There's a whole literature discussion about whether Tier 3 is special education, but the literature I read says that more or less it is. As far as the equitability of special education services, one thing we should remember is that the overall definitions may be different from what is the truth on the ground. For example, it's been shown that when students are placed into special education, their chance of being so placed depends strongly on the performance level of the school they're in. So if you're at the 30th percentile in, say, reading, and you're at one of the highest performing schools, you could be at the bottom of that school and placed into special education. Whereas if you were in a low performing school, you might be perfectly average in that school. So contextual factors matter. In general, there has been much discussion of the idea that African American and other non-white students are overplaced into special ed. But when you hold constant, when you compare students with the same need for academic assistance based on their reading or math test scores, we actually find that these students are underplaced. If you compare Black and white students with the same test scores, you'll find that the Black student has a lower probability of being placed into special education. This is a finding that's true nationwide. It's less true in California than nationwide, but it's still true. It's also the case that in general, the probability that a California student will be placed into special ed compared to the rest of the country, holding constant their performance level, the probability is lower for a California student to be placed into special ed. So we don't seem to be making these services as widely available as some other states are doing. As I said, response to intervention is really the overriding program that's in place nationwide. It was adopted by California in 2006. There has been a national evaluation of it, but there's never been an evaluation within California. That is to say, how effective is it? Is it remediating students? The idea of response to intervention is that if you're in need of help, if you're below grade level, but not all the way at the bottom, then you get tier 2 services. And if you don't respond positively, make gains, get back up to grade level to those tier 2 services, then you need tier 3 services. And that's likely to mean that you have a disability and need special education services, which raises the issue of what are those tier 2 services and how effective are they? Well, in general, the national experts on response to intervention have pretty much agreed that it has not been implemented successfully nationwide in most schools. There was a national effectiveness study, including California schools, and it came up with no effect. Kids who were getting these RTI services in tier 2 were showing no more gains than otherwise similar students who were not getting those services. The state, to my mind, has somewhat ignored that discussion among the academics and has instead put forward a more demanding version of RTI, which is multi-tiered systems of support, MTSS. And basically, that to me looks like we're still doing RTI to remediate academic difficulties, but now the teachers at schools are supposed to be doing the same for behavioral and social emotional difficulties. But there are no added resources and personnel on the ground, so teachers are unlikely to successfully implement this, particularly if you've seen that they've had difficulty implementing simple RTI. The discussion of the problems with having successful tier 2 and tier 3 services has often revolved around the fact that evidence-based interventions typically do not scale up, which is to say that when you try to do them on a larger scale, you don't get the same effects. Either they get smaller or they disappear altogether. The journal Educational Researcher, which is read by everyone in the American Education Research Association, their December issue was entirely devoted to the failure to scale up of these evidence-based interventions. In other words, implementation really is difficult, and it's something we finally have to face. Cautionary tales of failures to scale up are widespread. There was California's class size reduction. There was Success for All reading intervention, which helped with phonics, but suddenly did not help with comprehension when it was scaled up on a large scale. The Tennessee State pre-K, the evaluation of special education itself, and RTI's national evaluation all showed a failure to scale up successfully. So what will it take to do this? Once again, I return to tier 2 interventions and the kids who should be getting them. You might think of these as the kids between the 10th and 40th percentiles in reading and math. Above the 40th percentile, you're performing at grade level. Below the 10th percentile, you're very low and need special education services. In my view and in my experience out in the schools, the teachers have been asked to add on to their regular jobs the need to create these tier 2 services without any special funds dedicated to them. One thing they could use is some help monitoring student progress every 6 weeks. RTI or MTSS mandate that the teacher should look at the kids' scores every 6 weeks and reallocate their scheduling to services as needed. It's not something teachers are easily able to do on top of everything they're doing already. The other thing is, what are these tier 2 services going to be? My own suggestion is dedicated instructional aides who have been trained to do this and who are inexpensive enough that they could reach the relatively large number of students who need this help. The extra resources needed to be provided directly at the classroom level, and given the national discussion, we really should not expect immediate success. Instead, there ought to be an acknowledgement that we don't, in general, get immediate success, and there should be plans for an iterative process of continuous improvement that includes data collection out in the districts where these programs have to be made successful. Thank you.